Hi, this is Eli, the SnoKing Beekeepers Association, and our meeting topic tonight is a summary and the highlights of the 4th International Hive Monitoring Conference, which was organized and run mostly by Frank Linton and Jerry Bromenshenk, who both have talks, presentations inside the conference. The presentations have been put online, and I'll be happy to send that link. I'm going to actually PDF all the slides you see, and I'll post them on our SnoKing Beekeepers Facebook group discussion page. Look under files. There were, I believe, 49 presentations. The first 2 talks are an overview and history of hive monitoring. Just a little on how we got into it and how it's just exploded in the last few years. I'll try to cover a little of how it's local and global. It's for hobbyists and commercial. There's citizen science in these presentations. There's professional researchers talking about the research. There's how to show your data visually, visual results, and there's a lot of heavy-duty math on the data analytics. There's some presentations that are really very interesting to do-it-yourselfers, and there's also the ready out of the box people like me. There's single sensor talks plus multiple sensors on a single hive. There's some emphasis on beekeeping is local, which here in Western Washington, we agree. We know beekeeping is location specific. There's some updates on how research is done. There's great examples of how to use weight, temperature, acoustics, weather data to observe or predict the hive events over time. I didn't see that they convincingly in any presentation could predict swarms. They could tell you it had just happened, and if you could race outside, if you got an alert on your cell phone bee app, then you could rush outside and trap the swarm. I didn't see humidity ever used. Bees are tropical insects, and they tend to put their humidity high. Up to 80% is normal in a hive. So humidity hasn't been very useful that I have seen, especially in Western Washington, where we don't worry about low humidity in hives. I'll try to cover these topics kind of in this order. Go through the commercial part first. There's companies out there that are trying to sell their management services and their software. There's a lot of how to turn raw data. Often it's a continuous recording, continuous readings of some form of data into a visual, and then use that to help time your tasks, like feeding or taking supers on and off, or doing pest control treatments, mite treatments. How to get that data to give you alerts. There's where the software really starts coming in. And updates on your hive that you can see and reduce the number of hive inspections that you make. There's some MBA-speak in there, and those of you who are in the business field, you'll understand it. I really feel like I'm talking to an MBA, and there's quite a bit on how to market to beekeepers and what they want and what they don't want. And sometimes MBAs who don't keep bees are very surprised at that. A lot on how to visualize the data, graphs, heat maps, charts. There's math galore. If you really like past calculus, wow, they've got advanced math. A little computer coding, a little XML. There's interesting presentations. They're just interesting. You just absolutely have to see the one about bees being trained to find unexploded weapons, landmines, by the scent of leaking chemicals that they give off. There's a whole foreign language and research terms. If you want to talk about any of those afterwards, it's a great review. If you're getting ready to read research papers, you need the terms. And if you get the PDF, you'll have them listed. I didn't try to define them all, but I'd be happy to talk about them. Citizen science is really big. In beekeeping, Often we find we can get tens of thousands of readings from a larger area than we could ever get if we paid people to do it. We can get individual beekeepers to download their information, often on a cell phone, up to the internet, and contribute to a database that's continuously growing. And there's actually some presentations on trying to deal with that, on how to standardize that and make sure it's shareable. There's what is available to hobbyists right now in apps, sensors. Can you Bluetooth it to your cell phone? Can you upload it to the internet? Can you use it in a remote area? And there was quite a bit on forage, on how to know where bees are going, which is very important to pollinators and to pollination contract people, because they want to space their hives the best they can. But there's also some great citizen science opportunities in there. And Western Washington is a citizen science opportunity area. People get involved in environmental issues. Okay, so I'm going to put the PDF under files. Now, a number of the presentations were about commercial apiary management services. People trying to tell a beekeeper that they could help them on their cell phone with little checklists and drop-down menus, trying to say that they can help you keep track of where you're going and what you're taking and what you need to take to each apiary as you visit, or as you send one of your employees out to visit it. There were some nice shots in one of these on the New Zealand Manuka plantation, the most expensive honey I think you can buy in the world right now, that Manuka honey. Another company was the Smart Apicultural Management Services, SAMS. Bee Hero, actually located, I think, in Europe, in Israel. And they had some monitoring systems and apiary record keeping. These are all for commercial. SolutionBee.com had the opportunity to buy the sensor and get the free app and use it as a hobbyist or as a commercial. I'm sure they make more money with a commercial, but they did think of us hobbyists. Now, when these management services are looking for clients, they are looking all over the world. Here's one of them. This was one of the talks. And they're looking all over, third world countries, first world countries, remote areas. And they talk a lot about the business models and how it's been difficult to meet that, but they're sure they can. It is interesting to know the reach of what's happening in beekeeping. Software companies, some of it is open source. Melisphera, that top one, it's not what I looked at it and I didn't think it was user friendly. It says it's for beekeepers and researchers. I think you'd have to know someone who knows software a little better than what used to be called Visual Basic. Another company was Golden Soft company, and that company, I didn't see that they were already involved in working with beekeepers. Sounded as if they were interested in the market. SAS is supposed to be one of the largest software companies in the world. Does software only. Will work with whatever sensors the client uses, and they're the ones that on the group discussion page, I put their worker piping video. And they say they can work with all these different parameters, all these different measurements. They were not in the bee business until a few of their employees said, hey, we've got some hives out back, and there's a solar farm that is giving us all the weather data we need to figure out if that affects the bee behavior. And all these terms on here are way beyond me. I stopped at calculus and took a deep breath and felt grateful that I made it through. But I do like the way, for example, on the bottom picture, it shows you how they took the noise out of the acoustic spectrogram. And on the right-hand side, that's the queen piping. The worker piping, I have a picture of that later, I think. Now, a lot of these presentations were what I call MBA-speak. People who are into business understand it. And there was this old movie called Office Space, 1999. And there's a scene in it where the administrative, MBA, business type people on the left, the two of them are asking the man who is the interface between the engineers and the clients what he does. And he gets really, really mad. And I have seen work situations like this. With beekeepers, the companies that are courting the beekeepers are often having a massive problem. So a number of the presentations and a lot of the question and answer, they had question and answer after each of the 5 days. They'd have the presentations with a lunch break in between, but there were about 3 or 4 hours of presentations. Then they'd have the question and answer series, and they were still talking about the problem that beekeepers have to believe that they're paying for something that's more than just they could already do themselves. It's faster to look in the hive until you have a lot of hives. And until they see it, that it's going to help them. So marketing to beekeepers was a big thing on a number of these presentations. I won't go through this is the boring part of the presentation. Hang in there with me, okay? It was turning the technology and research into business. And beekeeping does have to be sustainable business-wise as well as environmentally. And David Firth at the University of Montana, he spoke on how trying to find the audience for what you can offer in technology that might help a beekeeper. And it was very surprising. He's totally business and he's talking to beekeepers. And this was a project where you had to find out, could you even get the beekeepers to talk to you? And were they even interested? The second item here, Bee Guru, is a acoustic app that you put your cell phone inside the hive, and from that reading, Jerry Bromenshenk and his team have been working at Bee Alert technology for about 10 years. And I'll show you what they've said they've come up with. They say they're getting success in knowing what's going on in your hive, and not just 1 or 2 things, but a whole list of things. Infrared imaging of pollination hives did interest beekeepers. They have found a use for that. Infrared tells you how many bees are in the hive. That can tell you how strong the hive is. That can tell you that you've got a hive you can ask more money for. There's a talk here coming up by Bee Corps, and a woman did a very good job of describing how you verify that the beekeeper market exists first, and then you design a tool to fit it. And they received a grant, it might have been from NSF too, National Science Foundation, in case nobody knows NSF. And there's a lot of talk about problems such as no Wi-Fi or cellular service available after you've got a system that the beekeeper wants. And here she is. This is the woman who did an excellent sales pitch. So watching her, none of these presentations was over 15 minutes, and a lot of them were shorter. Listening to her explain what monitoring service should do for commercial beekeepers. And she was recognizing right away poor translation of current scientific knowledge to practical beekeeping. That research is out there, it could be helping us, and we're often not getting the benefit of it. So she explains the ideal, that if a beekeeper is going to be interested in a monitoring service, there should be no additional tasks or special knowledge that the beekeeper needs to do. They're busy enough already. And they're going to expect cutting-edge technology. And that it's going to tell them what to do for their colony and when. And they need to be able to use machine learning, all that fancy in the background software, without really understanding it. Ideally, if it includes sensor system with the software and monitoring, it's an entire system, it should be self-installed. You don't need more than a screwdriver, and it should start up, should be rapid deployment. And her system, I think she said, was less than 2 minutes high. So this woman's kind of great for an MBA type approach. When you get the data, now you still have the problem what to do with it. And this was just an interesting graph where they went for one variable at a time, temperature variability, and the amount of CO2. Okay, every living thing, organism gives off CO2 as it respires, as it takes energy sources, carbon energy sources, combines with oxygen, usually oxygen, and breathes out CO2. So they looked at this to see how healthy a hive was, and they deliberately fed one hive imidacloprid, one of the neonicotinoids, in sugar syrup, and the other, the control hive, only got sugar syrup. So we got to get the data in something visual, and I think this does show pretty well. The top graph shows that the red, the hive that got the neonicotinoid, couldn't maintain temperature. Couldn't bring up, it was, yeah, it couldn't bring its temperature up as high as the other one. And then when it came to carbon dioxide, it couldn't hold its carbon dioxide down. That would take more analysis as to what that really means, but it sounds sick. There's one of the user small scale beekeeper friendly devices is an O'Keefe's scale. And it was amazing looking at some of these graphs and some of these reports when people they're trying to sell you a product and then help support you through using it. It was amazing how much just weight over time showed you. It's a squiggly line, but those squiggles are up, down, high weight changes every day. You actually know how many bees you have. And that's what it says printed on that graph, if you can read it, how many pounds of bees are coming and going daily. And that the population is basically going up, and the store's population doesn't distinguish. But just that graph could help you see spring buildup. You could actually, there's ways you could tell if you were going queenless. You could tell whether or not you're at your maximum weight, and you can go take some off, 128 pounds, if that's your point at which you can take some off. You could see if there was a sudden drop in the weight, whether there's robbing. A sudden drop in the weight would also there's a way it spikes. I think I have a graph of that later that shows you swarming and just general hive strength. It's amazing. Oh, and dearth was the top one. If this, in July, we tend to have a dearth about this time of the year. If that overall curve started to fall, then we'd be looking maybe at feeding through our summer dearth here. I don't know that was in our area. And here's a man who actually, I guess his presentation is actually on the TED Talks under the heartbeat of a hive, Kilton Temby. And this is some of what he got. His unit of measure isn't temperature or weight or CO2. He's using bees per second detected by a video camera. And he's saying he can tell all these things, robbing in the upper left, and then you have queenlessness, here it is. There's just negative trend, something's wrong. It's not very stable, it's doing funny spikes. They put in new brood frames for emergency queen creation. And then it took, if you calculate out how long it takes to raise a new queen and have her lay, and then you can see between the 13th of July and the 7th of September, the recovery starts when the new brood is hatching out and the hive's taking off again. And this was the little camera he used to count bees per second, and some software that could calculate what qualified as a bee and not two bees and not just a bee sitting on the hive, but bees actually flying, moving in and out. I just put the next couple of slides are about interesting studies. This is a PhD candidate at the University of Montana who cut a hole in the side of a hive. And then he didn't cut the hole so he could see the first frame. He cut it so he could see into the brood. And if you look at the upper left, you can see how he did it. And then he took thermal images. He wanted to see, how hot is the brood, measure the temperature, and look at how the bees heat. And on a heat map, and this is truly a heat map, thermal imaging, he found that the bees on the brood frame, looking at the lower right, the white thorax, and actually this is detailed enough that if you watch the presentation, I think you can see it's the thorax where the bees vibrate, they shiver their muscles, and they generate heat, and there are heater bees. You can see that some of the bees are not doing the heat. They're probably feeding the larvae. And he also found that they had certain places they wanted to go. And if you look at the FLIR image up above it, you can see that there's certain cells that are being kept warmer. Apparently, those larvae need more on this brood frame. And then the grading the hives for pollination. That one, people, the beekeepers, I think they're having some luck on that. Done at night to get good infrared images, and they verified it with visual inspections, but they found that they could get that it's a good hive or a bad hive. They could not get, I don't think that it was an ultra strong hive, but they could get that it was in the range, it was quality, and would get a good price.